Power Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back. Matthew Maurer here, and we're going to jump right into this. As many may or may not know, one of the focal points as being an NBA draft historian and also just dealing with the game of basketball, I am highly invested into the NBA draft. And we got some news recently. The NBA has approved Makur Maker to be able to go into this year's NBA draft. Now, in case you don't know, Makur Maker is the cousin, if that last name Maker seems familiar, he is the cousin of Thon Maker, who was drafted, I want to say 2016 by the Milwaukee Bucks, and then after that was traded to Detroit after some years of the Bucks, I guess, just not liking what they saw of him. And now he also has Thon Maker has a brother named Makur Maker, who also declared for the NBA draft, was not selected, and thus this opens the door for Makur Maker. Now, Makur Maker, just to give you guys a little bit of background, he is an Australian that originally was part of a Kenyan family. So he's born in Kenyan, but his family, I don't know around how old he was, but they then relocated to Australia. And after that, he took up the game his cousins played and came over into the United States. Now, he's bounced around a couple times. He's currently right now having a fifth year at Hillcrest Prep. And, he's been in the news recently. He's been a guy that there's definitely some things to like about him. The fact that he faces up, he's a very good ball handler for his size, has some range on his shot. But in terms of athleticism, he's not the athlete his cousins are. And as many may not know, if you've been following me, I actually thought that was one of the things about Thon Maker that I didn't like was his athleticism. If I had to pick a slot where I would probably put him right now, it would probably be a late second round pick. Maybe not even drafted. I don't know. He's got some work to do, and the pre-draft camps are going to be hugely vital for him. I said pre-draft camps. I'm sorry, I'm including Portsmouth in that. He would not be eligible for Portsmouth. As everybody knows, that's a senior-driven tournament. But he would have to definitely impress in workouts, and definitely going to the pre-draft camp down in Orlando is going to definitely sink or swim him when it comes to the NBA draft. I kind of think he's not ready. I mean, he's certainly not as skilled offensively as Thon Maker was, and I don't think he's the athlete that either one of those guys were. Like, he's got some things he's got to deal with, and he's definitely, I don't think he has any interest in going to college. His, I guess you can call him his handler, his guardian, Eddie Smith, has basically said that, look, he's pretty much going to stay in the draft. They actually had a backup idea of case the NBA wasn't going to approve his application for the draft. They were actually shopping around some overseas teams, and he caught a little bit of the social media buzz when Makur Maker actually visited an HBCU, because he said that many colleges are backing off him because they thought he was just going to go pro. And it looks like their information was correct, because that's indeed what he is doing. We also got news with Reggie Jackson. A few years ago when Jackson signed in Detroit for the amount of money he did, you had some saying, well, that's about right. And historically, Jackson is among the better picks at 24. And when I say better picks, I mean he's probably a top 12 all-time pick at number 24 in the draft, has put up some good numbers, was always a exceptional value for teams. But I think with Detroit now looking like they're going to do a total rebuild, I mean, they shipped out Andre Drummond, they've now shipped out him, and now the Clippers were able to snag yet again another piece from LA. At this point, you kind of feel like the Clippers have more weapons than they can even use. Doc Rivers is going to have to do a tremendous job at getting those guys all on the same page, and that can be difficult for any head coach. I mean, with all those pieces and with all those egos, people think basketball is about X's and O's, and that's not always the case. It's not about X's and O's. Sometimes it's just about managing egos. This leads me to an issue that I've had over the past couple weeks about John Beilein. John Beilein, in case you don't know, or if you lived in some small village somewhere and you're not getting the news, John Beilein stepped away from the Cleveland Cavs. And the fallout has been pretty interesting for me. I've seen people come out and condemn the Cleveland Cavalier players. I've heard them take sound bites of those Cleveland Cavalier players and just further rip into them. And one of those biggest was Charles Barkley. I mean, Charles Barkley went out and basically said that these players are unprofessional. Now, here's the thing, and I think this is important. I don't have a problem with a player or a person because, look, in life, this thing called life is a mess. And sometimes mistakes are made, and it would really help us if we made sure at times that we looked for that guidance from people who have lived this life, and we accept that guidance. Now, Charles Barkley is a guy that really shouldn't have the conversation about what's professional and what's not. Not Charles Barkley. Joe Dumars can have that conversation. Tim Duncan can have that conversation. Manu Ginobili, Kobe Bryant, God bless his soul. A lot of players can have this conversation with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and nothing is going to be said back in their direction. But Charles Barkley, the guy who spit on little kids, the guy who ripped every head coach he's ever had, the guy who wrote a book and basically threw his whole team under the bus, couldn't take the heat that the book caused and said that he was misquoted in his own autobiography that he co-wrote. So Charles Barkley having this opinion about people being unprofessional, I'm sorry, but that's BS. I mean, come on, man. You cannot come out and make this kind of statement. Now, if Charles Barkley wanted to say, listen, I'm going to give you guys some free advice, and here's what I did during my career that I wish if I could go back, I wish I didn't do it. And if Charles Barkley said that, I don't think anybody would sit there and say, you know what? Screw what Charles Barkley's saying. I think that would be very receptive for a lot of players, because a lot of players know the history of the game. I know people don't believe that they do, but people know about Charles Barkley. They know about his commercial about, I'm not a role model. They know about him throwing people through windows. They know about this stuff. I mean, Charles Barkley is anything but a quiet person. He's just not that. That's not who he is. Barkley is, in many aspects, a guy that has put himself in a position, right or wrong, to be a lightning rod for bad decisions. Now, look, I think the thing about Charles Barkley that people withstand his mess ups is because Charles Barkley is somewhat of a charming person. He's a jerk, sure, but he's a charming jerk. And I think a lot of people sit there and they say, oh, you know what? He's not a bad guy. He has some qualities to him. But Charles Barkley really doesn't. Charles Barkley is a guy that goes around and gives his opinion, whether asked or not, and then will turn around and say, well, let me rip these guys. Instead of let me guide these guys, instead of saying let me mentor these guys, instead of telling these guys my mistakes, Charles Barkley goes through this rant as if he doesn't have a glass house. And, my grandmother used to always say, if you're going to throw your stone, that's fine. But if you have a glass house, prepare for stones to be thrown back at you. And Charles Barkley speaks like a man who doesn't have a glass house. And my friend, you have a very thin glass house. So while, yes, you can say whatever you want to say, but if you're not coming from a place of mentoring, if you're not coming from a place of helpfulness, if you're not coming from a place of Respect? Well, why should any player take what you have to say with any grain of salt? I mean, if anything, Charles Barkley is what not to do. And I got to be honest, if Charles Barkley grew up in this era of media coverage with social media and, camera phones and all this other stuff that occurs in today's world, I don't know if Charles Barkley would be able to have a job, much less, go on TV and espouse this hubris righteousness in which he proclaims that players are unprofessional when he was the very solidified version in the 90s of being unprofessional. It's just that people liked him because he was charming and he could say things in a funny way, and therefore people said, you know what, I accept it. But let's not sit here and try to act like Charles Barkley saying something that he's not qualified to say. Sure, he's qualified to say it. Absolutely. He's a former player. He's one of the greatest players of all time. I don't think most people are going to sit there and say, you know what, I don't want to hear what Charles Barkley has to say. I think most people are going to sit there and say, I don't want to hear what Charles Barkley has to say if he's going to try to belittle people, which is what Barkley goes to 9 out of 10 times. And by the way, before I get any hate, understand that's not me saying this. Even former players during Charles Barkley's time with the Philadelphia 76ers, former players like Julius Erving, former players like Bobby Jones, all tried to reach out, all tried to steer Charles Barkley and massage the relationship between Charles Barkley and the back office, Charles Barkley and his teammates. So when I see people say, oh, but, Barkley should know a thing or two. Yeah, Barkley does know a thing or two. But Barkley also is out there caping for some reason I don't know. I guess he's just trying to solidify his brand as a guy who will say anything to a group of players, but will be quiet about things that happen in the back offices. Again, he should be quiet. He should stay out of this, because if you're not going to sit there, you're not going to mentor these guys, you're not going to try to make them better players and better people, then you should just keep quiet. Moving on to the next topic. Has anybody seen how well Nick Richards has been playing from Kentucky? It's impressive. And Nick Richards, I gotta be honest, he had that look during his first 2 years at Kentucky. Like, here we go again. Here's another blue chip guy who's not going to work out, a la Marcus Lee. That's how it was looking. Didn't look like he was a guy that was going to back up his high school profile. Nick Richards was a top 20 high school player. Nick Richards was a blue chip All-American, a McDonald's All-American. So to see what he's doing now and how he's putting it together, I mean, he's averaging 14 points, 8 rebounds, 2.5 blocks. You can't help but to be impressed. And I can tell you this right now, he's moved up draft boards for sure. He's still raw offensively, but I can tell you this, he certainly made himself a space in the NBA draft. I don't know where I would put him right now. I don't think I would put him in the first round still if I was to do a mock today, but without a doubt, he's definitely improved his draft stock. I'm guessing he'll probably declare this year. If I was a gambling man, he'll probably declare this year to engage where he's at, to see what he needs to work on, to see what NBA folks are telling him about his draft stock. And from there, I'm sure he'll make the intelligent, rational decision, which hasn't always occurred within the NBA draft, but it does happen from time to time. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt until he proves me wrong. If you follow on Twitter and you're a fan of basketball guys who talk on Twitter, one cannot help to come across the timeline of Fran Fraschilla. Now, Fran Fraschilla is a former Division I coach. ESPN uses him a lot with overseas basketball players, where he kind of gives a synopsis and a little mini scouting report on TV about the international basketball community and the prospects that come out of it. So he recently said on Twitter, and I quote, "So many Villanova NBA prospects have been underrated recently. that teams will make the same mistake. Teams will not make the same mistake with Sadiq Bey. Wildcats are masters of the 2 and 3 and dones. Okay. I don't know what to really say about this, because for a guy to go out on and speak out socially that somehow NBA scouts have missed the boat on players, okay, in what way? Because since 2015, there's been 7 draft picks. 2018, there was 3 first-round draft picks. Mikal Bridges at 10, Dante DiVincenzo at 17, and Amari Spellman at 30. Now, Spellman was a redshirt freshman. Jason Hart went 30th in 2017, and you have Jalen Brunson who went 33rd in 2018. So that's 4 draft picks from a college basketball team in 1 year. Deron Hillard, 38th in 2015. I don't know where they're seeing this, that the players have been, underrated by NBA scouts. How do you figure? And I'm betting that the majority of Fran Fraschella's conversation is because of 2019 NBA draft, Eric Pascal, 41st. And every year there's guys that are drafted in the second round, and they fall in the second round for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's off the court. Sometimes it's a couple blown workouts. Sometimes, they went to a pre-draft camp and were out of shape or sluggish with their play. I mean, there's a whole host and a myriad of reasons as to why a player with first-round talent can slide into the second round. This is nothing new. We've seen this forever. We've seen this with Lauren Woods. We saw this with Reggie Freeman, Shea Seals, Andre Woolridge. There has been countless players that we have seen, Deontay Davis a few years ago, who had first-round grades and for whatever reason slid into the second round or didn't get drafted at all. It happens more times than a guy like Fran Fraschilla wants to admit. To be honest, is Eric Pascal doing well? Sure, he's averaging 13 points. He's averaging 5 rebounds a game. He's got a 13.6 PER. League average is 15. So he's showing that he's an above average, efficient player. The Warriors are 12 and 45. Like, did we forget that part? The Warriors are 12 and 45. We really don't know what he is right now. We have no clue. Because right now he's on a team that doesn't have a great winning time right now. They're out there, they're fighting tooth and nail just to get certain wins. And right now the Warriors are battling for a early draft pick. That's what they're battling for. They're trying to get into the draft lottery. And right now they're 12 and 45. And I'm supposed to believe that Eric Pascal is now the steal of all steals because of this? Like, I don't know if I can go into that. I don't know if I can co-sign that. Okay, and then let's look at who hasn't been drafted. So you have Ryan Arcidiacono, definitely should have been drafted now, it's looking like. I mean, he's played 3 years for the Chicago Bulls. I believe he has 159 career games. So he's scratching that undrafted gems part for sure. And I don't know why anybody's shocked by that. I mean, the undrafted play, because of overseas draft market, because of the NBA taking more and more chances with potential, it shouldn't come to a surprise to anybody that the average NBA draft has about 3 to 4 undrafted gems. And what I mean by an undrafted gem, I'm not just talking about a player who goes to the NBA draft, has a couple cups of coffee. I'm talking about a player that has played in the NBA for at least 5 years. I'm talking about a player that has under their belt at least 250 career games. Now, that's pretty significant. That's not just some run-of-the-mill guy. That's a guy. That's a serious player there. I mean, that joins the list of guys like Brad Miller, Ben Wallace, Chris Childs, John Starks, Brad Lohaus. I mean, there's a whole litany of guys who have put in some real time and never were touched by an NBA team. Is it unheard of that Ryan Arcidiacono is a guy that didn't get picked? No, it's not unheard of. It's not unheard of at all. I mean, does it look like he should have been picked now? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But does it mean that NBA scouts are underrating Villanova prospects? I mean, to me, this is insane. And then so if we're going to sit here and we're going to get all crazy about guys, okay, let's look at Mitchell Robinson. Now, Mitchell Robinson went in the second round. Mitchell Robinson is the number 2 player in his draft class, surpassed only by Luka Doncic. Believe this or not, I'm about to give you a stat that's going to blow your mind. Is the number 2 player within his draft class that has the second most win shares. Only Luka Doncic has more. And by the way, Luka Doncic only has 2 more win shares than Mitchell Robinson. 2 more. That's it. Went in the second round. 36 overall, I believe. Okay, so did NBA scouts mess up with that? I mean, if we're going to point out Pascal, okay, why are we not pointing out Mitchell Robinson then? And then, just to further validate Mitchell, for the year right now, he's putting up 73% of his field goals. He's making 73% of his shots. He's averaging 9 rebounds. 9 points a game, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks. And he's got a PER, and that's player efficiency rating, of 22. So we're sitting here and we're talking about Eric Pascal, who has a very good numbers. He's got 13.6 PER. Not bad numbers. Again, league average is 15. So he's doing his thing. He's not a bum. He's a great player. So you're going to get no argument from me that Eric Pascal looks like he should have been drafted in the first round. Got no problem saying that. But if we're going to sit here and we're going to crown Villanova for something that every player has had happen to them, in which they slide into the second round and they show they have way more value than they were originally viewed as. I mean, this isn't about anti-Villanova. This is about how hard the process is of being a talent evaluator, because you still don't get it right. You're going to miss out on guys. It's what it is. And Saddiq Bey, right now, I have him as a late first, early second. I'm not in love with the guy. Doesn't mean that the guy isn't going to come out and kill it. Doesn't mean that I'm thinking the guy is not good. I'm just simply stating that if Fran's whole point is that the NBA sucks at their job when it comes to Villanova, I can't co-sign that, because they've drafted 7 players since 2015. It's very hard. I don't think there's many other, and look, it seems like a lot, I know, but I don't think there's many other teams that can make that claim in Division I basketball. Sure, I mean, you'll have your juggernauts like Kentucky, sure, Duke, UNC, but Villanova is right up there. They're not far behind. And I just think it's kind of lazy when we sit here and we say, well, Villanova players outperform all the time. And I remember, this reminds me, again, because I pay attention to these things, I remember when people said the same thing about Ben Howland's UCLA Bruin players. They said, the NBA scouts just don't know how to evaluate Ben Howland's players. Okay. If that's what you believe. And before that, it was Dean Smith. So what I'm saying is sometimes, yeah, NBA scouts, they struggle to get guys, sure. But that doesn't mean that they're bad at their job. It doesn't mean that Villanova is being blocked out from having NBA players selected from that program. It just simply means, like, look, this is a really hard job, and sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. But to sit there and highlight it as though There's a group of scouts that are saying, "Oh, he goes to Villanova. I'm not going to take him in the first round." That's insane. That really is. That's insanity. I can't co-sign that. Which leads us to our final topic tonight. I'm trying to condense these down to about 30 minutes. I know anytime something goes over 30 minutes, it's sometimes hard to pay attention to. Bear with me as I try to perfect this podcast better to meet your guys' needs. So with Kobe Bryant being sent off by the LA Lakers, it was a send-off. His wife was there. Michael Jordan, my goodness, that was an incredible speech. And it seemed like everybody came out to show Kobe love. I decided to honor Kobe Bryant. We're going to do a top 8, because that was his other number. We're going to do a top 8 of who were the best players picked 24th in the NBA draft. Number 1, shouldn't be a surprise, but that's Kyle Lowry. Kyle, for his career, is 15 points a game, 6 assists per game. His PER is 18. He's got 92 win shares. Just an incredible talent to get that late in the draft. And by the way, Fran, that was a Villanova player. Number 2, Terry Porter. Terry Porter averaged 12.2 points per game, 5.6 assists per game, 17 PER, and 110 win shares. The thing about Terry Porter that made me choose him over Latrell Sprewell was the fact he went to two NBA finals, I believe. I know he got the one with Portland, and he's got 2 All-Star appearances. And for a time, Terry Porter was viewed as one of the hardest players to play against at his position, which then leads me to number 3. And number 3 is going to be unpopular for some people, not unpopular for me, but that's Latrell Sprewell. Averaging 18 points, 4 rebounds, 4.1 assists per game. Latrell suffered greatly with efficiency. Despite his gaudy numbers, you're talking about a 15 PER, half the amount of win shares, 56. So one could argue, well, Matt, why are you putting Latrell Sprewell up this high? Well, it's pretty simple. I think Latrell Sprewell at one time was a top 3 shooting guard, a guy who had that rare ability to take over games. And if not for running into PJ Carlesimo and having that whole horror unfold, I think Latrell Sprewell's career would have been slightly different. For whatever reason, and I'm not saying it was right or wrong, but Latrell Sprewell's career definitely took a hit after that event, and I think it's pretty safe to say that's why I believe he's the number 3 best all-time player picked 24th. Arvydas Sabonis comes in at number 4, and without a doubt, if there is a player who I love more than Arvydas Sabonis, there's not many. Let me tell you, there's really not many. Arvydas Sabonis was everything. He was one of the best centers in the world in a time that the basketball world didn't even understand how big the game had gotten outside of America. Like, we didn't understand it. We thought that outside of America, sure, there were a couple people, but they weren't like our guys. And Arvydas Sabonis, very early on in his career, established himself as a real problem. He took on Ralph Sampson at a time when Ralph Sampson was the unmitigated number 1 player in all of college basketball. He took him on and outplayed him as an 18-year-old. That says quite a bit. I think had the political red tape that Sabonis went through at Lithuania, which at the time was a part of the Soviet Union, I think we would have saw Arvydas Sabonis a lot higher in this. I really do. Number 5, Sam Cassell, the consummate witty point guard, great toughness. Didn't back down from a whole lot. Had the ability to score. How could you not like Sam? 15.7 points a game, 6 assists, 19.5 PER, and a win share total of 87. So, quite impressive. Andrei Kirilenko comes in at 6. Now, here's the thing about Andrei Kirilenko. There has always been rumors with Kirilenko that he was a little bit older than people originally believed. Like, there is, among NBA circles, there is definitely a conversation in which people believe that Kirilenko is anywhere between 3 to 4 years removed from his reported age. I mean, this is a real conversation. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. There's a real conversation that goes on with Kirilenko, and the reason being for that is Kirilenko, he has this career that starts off well. Then there's the middle where he's one of the better defenders in the league, all-star, just incredible small forward. And then all of a sudden, he falls off a cliff. Now, many people have stated that some of this is due to his age. I have no clue. I don't know. But there is some validity to the fact that it did feel like he just all of a sudden got really old really fast. I mean, again, I don't know if it's as far out as the 4 years as some people have suggested. But let's not act like this is crazy, because we just saw Buddy Hield have a year, added to his profile. We just saw Steve Francis a couple years ago had the same dilemma as Buddy Hield. So this does happen, and it happens in America, and it's happened in non-American places. Most famously is Tanguy Ngobu, who David Kahn and the Minnesota Timberwolves drafted, and come to find out, instead of drafting a 19-year-old player, he drafts a 26-year-old forward from Qatar. And literally that pick is one of the worst picks of all time, because actually maybe it wasn't 20. I think he was 28. He was 28 years old. And that's still somewhat disputed. I mean, you have some people within Wikipedia and other areas that believe, okay, I kind of believe him. Maybe it really is 89, but we also at the same time have to realize that this age is definitely disputed. And he himself, his own federation of Qatar, because he played basketball at Qatar, they listed him as being born in 4 more years away from where we originally had him. So instead of 1988, they had him being born in 1984, and that was the federation of Qatar basketball. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and many of us were certainly choking on the fumes with that one. Number 7, Serge Ibaka. And Serge could still go up this list. 12 points a game, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, 17 PER, 67 win shares. You could say what you want about Serge. He came into the league as a raw shot blocker. He is going to leave the league as a great shot blocker who also can extend with range. There's a lot to like about Serge. And again, I definitely could see him moving up as his career progresses. And lastly, this one was a little hard, honestly. There was so many ways I could have gone with this, but I chose the reputation, and that is Rick Fox. I have Rick Fox the number 8 all-time top 8 player pick from the 24th pick. I don't think many people will argue with that. Okay, the last guy, and this was a little hard for me. Last guy was Rick Fox, one of the better players of his time period. Never was a superstar, but was definitely a high-level functioning starter. At Boston, he was widely used. At LA, he was widely, a lot of people loved playing with him. Career averages are 9.6 points per game, 3.8 rebounds per game, and 13.6 PER with a 44 0.7 win share. So definitely Rick Fox did his thing. Can't say enough about how much he's respected around NBA locker rooms. So he's more than made up his time at that slot. Now, again, no list would be complete without a couple honorable mentions. And I really am going to be interested to see how Anthony Simons develops in Portland. He's got all the skills. He's got a lot of skills. He's looked really good. Definitely could move his way up this list. Larry Smith, Mr. Mean, one of the toughest rebounders. Just didn't have a strong enough career to warrant consideration on this list, but certainly was a bona fide player and definitely deserving of the honorable mention. Reggie Jackson, who we just talked about. Again, if you look at him historically and you look at who was picked at his slot, he's one of the better picks of NBA draft history. And then last, Tim Hardaway Jr. Again, another guy that some people do not respect. Definitely one of the better players and has my respect. Will probably never be a winner per se. Like he's probably not a guy that you would want on your team to win. But I mean, he gets buckets. He creates. He does a lot of things well. So with that, I've got nothing but respect for Tim Hardaway Jr. And there it is, the top 8 with honorable mentions of the best players picked 24th in the NBA draft. That's all our time for today. I look forward to talking to you guys more and more. Again, if you really want to help me out, please subscribe. Please share this everywhere you can. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Talk to you later.